What's going on, everybody? Welcome. Today is Tuesday. It's September 13th, 2022. My name is Jeremy, and this is my first cup. That's so warm. Good morning, Brian and Mark and Andy and all the rest of you, whether you're watching live later or listening. Thanks for coming by. Appreciate you. I think I have allergies. I think I really have allergies. I don't know if you remember in the spring, I thought I was sick for the third time in a few weeks and turned out to be allergies. Yesterday, I suddenly ended up with all this sinus pressure, and I'm going, what is going on? And it feels similar. So that's a bummer. I took a hot shower before I even started the show. Helped a little. Good morning, Frank. Good morning, Jenny. Good morning, Nathan. Good morning, Dennis. Dennis is driving in the rain. Probably not as fun as singing in the rain, though. I want to know what you did yesterday. How was your Monday? What did you do? Did you do a lot of productive things? Did you train? Did you go anywhere? And I want to know what's going on today. My report's pretty simple. Yesterday was pretty much packed with meetings. I had a firearms lesson, came home, made some dinner, tried to make pesto. Didn't come out great. Came out well enough to save, but not great. And I went to bed. And then today's a light day. I'm getting through a bunch of projects. I don't even know. Do I even have meetings today? I feel like I have a meeting. Nope. Go away. That was TikTok. I do. I'm recording with Josh today. Josh and I are recording an episode of his podcast. We're going to talk about the novel that I wrote, Faith. And he's got some interesting stuff to ask me about it, especially the combat that occurs in the book. So that'll be fun. I'm looking forward to that. And yeah, so I'm glad that me not feeling so great is lining up with me not having a lot to do today, because that probably means I'll take some naps and such. Oh, more coffee. Coffee. My brain's feeling foggy. I'm not feeling like I'm dialed in, even the way I normally would be for the morning. So I apologize to all of you. If anybody wants to talk about what they did yesterday or what they're doing today, that might give me something to riff on. Otherwise, this might end up being a very short episode. Sent out a bunch of orders yesterday. We had our first international order that I've shipped in a long time. To Sweden, of all places. No, not to Jesse. But it was fun. It was fun watching that come in and going, wow, these people spent almost as much on shipping as they did on product. But then the actual shipping didn't cost so much. So I refunded the difference because I'll make money on stuff. We're not going to make money on shipping. That feels silly. Feels rude. And he's saying it's the weather. Yeah, it is. It is. I've had light allergies prior to this year in the spring. I've never had anything in the fall, but I know that there are a number of people dealing with ragweed allergies and stuff, and they're saying that it's really bad this year. So maybe that's just what's going on. What else? I'm going to try and make wine this evening. I've got all the stuff I need, fruit press, the grapes. We've talked about it. I wanted to do it over the weekend. It was the bottom of my priority list. It moved up on the list for today. So I'm going to try and give that a shot. No, I am going to give that a shot. We're going to try to do it. We'll see how it comes out. And yeah. And Kelly's helping me out, and I appreciate that. We were supposed to discuss things like how to protect others without actually fighting. Your story about hanging out to watch some guy because you thought there might be issues. Yeah. So if you weren't around yesterday, talked about a situation at the bank on Friday where I thought someone might get violent, so I stuck around in case he did. And he didn't. but it's a good subject for us to talk about. So, what I'd like you all to do in preparation is to think about and post in the chat any stories you have or thoughts you have kind of on that subject. How do we, as martial artists, protect, defend, stand up for, etc., in ways other than physical altercations? And I'll read them. Dennis says, I found this to be a particularly bad ragweed season for me. Well, there we go. Jenny says, took the trash out yesterday and realized how awfully humid it was. So switched gears and spent the day inside with Lilith. Colored and danced and made chicken fingers. Yes, actually made them. Did not use frozen for dinner. And started the Kata Centurion Challenge with Andrew and company. It was a nice day. Wow. That sounds like a pretty good day other than the humidity. And somehow it, nope, turn that off. Avel says, good luck on the wine. Let me know in 7 weeks. Supposedly, the stuff that I'm using finishes in 10 days. We'll see how true that is when I get in there. Mark, I've actually been taking some of that. Frank had to go to the doctor twice yesterday. Yikes. But Mark, I appreciate the reminder. I will make that a bigger part of my protocol over the next few days. So there we go. The main thing I'm doing, there's no dairy in my coffee. Staying away from the inflammatory foods. Stacy's going to the doctor's today. Wow. Everybody's going to the doctor. Why is everybody going to the doctor? That's kind of stinky. All right. So I'm going to kick off this discussion. We do have some stuff from Frank, so we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. Actually, let's do this. Let me give you some things to think about. And then while you're processing, I'll read the stuff that Frank gave us, and we can kind of launch off from there and let the conversation take it as far as we feel like taking it. When we start martial arts, especially if we start as a kid, we're given some very simple rules about when to do it, right? When do you use your martial arts? In training or competition, or if someone's trying to hurt you. Some people, as that age, as we're talking to older people, you might say, or someone you loved, protecting yourself or someone you love, okay? But as we get older and more skilled, and we're better able to integrate our skills into our lives, we recognize that there's a whole bunch of nuance in there. There's a whole bunch of very specific opportunities that could arise that would be appropriate. But we can't quite share it with young children in that way because it's not a simple rule. Right? So if we take the example of the bank, I was not concerned about the person standing behind me and that they would get violent. I thought they might become loud, will continue to be loud and expressive, which is unpleasant. And I would have said something to them simply as someone who just didn't want to hear their BS. But when the other person walked by, who walked between him and I, made a comment to him, that's when I said, oh, okay, this guy might be losing face. Right? So we look for these places in the world where someone is either trying to take advantage or trying to overcome a perceived slight. I think that's those probably the main two categories where it's not violent, could be violent, but it's not. And so our hands and our feet really aren't as useful in those situations as they could be in other situations. Thank you, Mark. Um, but one of the things that we can look at as martial artists is that as we continue to train, we become more confident. We are more likely to feel comfortable in difficult social situations and speak up for others because we are less fearful of the consequences that could escalate into violence. Right? Like this is what bullies have going for them, is that if you push them far enough, they might be violent. They might commit violence against you. But if you're not afraid of that consequence, doesn't mean you invite it or want it, but if you're not afraid of that, if it doesn't have the same hold over you that it has over maybe somebody who doesn't train, then you can do a lot of good. And so that's where I want us to go today. So think about that stuff, talk about that stuff, post that in the chat, and we're going to take a quick detour. Thanks to Frank. As always, thank you to Frank for all the things that he does for the show. Thanks to Josh for our theme song. Last Saturday was a Korean holiday. Did you know that? I didn't know that. Chuseok, also known as Hangawi. That doesn't sound right. If you're watching, you can see how it's transliterated. I don't think my pronunciation is very good. Is a major holiday in Korea that is observed on the 15th day of the 8th lunar month. The celebration lasts for 3 days. It is a harvest festival similar to the Chinese Mid-Autumn Festival, celebrated on the same day. We talked about that yesterday. Chuseok is an important public holiday in South Korea. During the festival, people visit their hometowns to pay respect to their ancestors. They visit their ancestors' graves, clean them, and perform special memorial rites. All 3 days of Chuseok are official non-working days. Wow. So Koreans can take their time to travel. During Chuseok, families gather for celebratory meals, which include traditional foods. Some of these foods are songpyeon, a type of rice cake, hangwa, a Korean traditional confectionery, japchae, a type of noodles, and bulgogi. Bulgogi? Bulgogi. I think I've heard this one before. Grilled marinated beef. It is also customary to play folk games to celebrate the beginning of autumn and good harvest. Since Chuseok is an ancient holiday that had been celebrated long before Korea was divided into two parts, North Koreans also observe it. However, in North Korea, this tradition was revived not long ago, and the holiday is not celebrated with much pomp. Most people are unable to visit the graves of their ancestors due to the existing restrictions on travel. So it's interesting, if you remember yesterday, just what I read yesterday, that you get these holidays that are more or less from the same concept, celebrated differently in different places. They're in America, we have Thanksgiving. Canadians have Thanksgiving. It's a different holiday. It's on a different day. Same sort of idea. So that's interesting to me. And nobody's given me stuff to talk about. All right, so I guess I'm going to have to fill the time here. So I gave you the example of the bank. I've told you before that there was an incident in high school that I remember very vividly where somebody was picking on somebody else, and I pretty much just walked up to him and said, "No, you're done. Stop that." And he did, because most bullies thrive on the feeling of power when no one stands up to them. It doesn't take much in most social situations, especially when we get into crowded situations full of adults. I remember another situation. Actually, I'll give you a couple that both came out of my time in Rotary. The first one was we had there was I think it was 2 or 3 politicians running for something, and they were speaking. Because I went to Rotary in Montpelier, which is the capital of Vermont, and so tended to be a little bit more political heavy than other Rotary groups in the state. And it was very clear that one of the Rotary members did not like the politics of one of these people, and he just went off, and he was yelling and angry, and his face was red. And I'm looking around because I'm definitely one of the youngest people there. I have no authority in the organization, and no one's doing anything. And here's this guy embarrassing himself by being a jerk. We're going back 15 years here. And I still regret not saying something, not going up to him quietly and saying, hey, sit down. Now, on a different day, good morning, Gad. Coffee's at a good temperature now. Still in Rotary. I don't remember if it was before or after. So I don't know if any of you remember, back before Google was like the dominant force in search. They were still the dominant force in search, but other businesses were trying to compete. And it's interesting, if you look at the statistics on search, it's Google by a long shot. But at one point, Microsoft funded a non-profit organization set up as a lobbying firm to try to get state-level action brought against Google. And what was it called? It was called Fair Search, Safe Search, something like that. Fair Search. I think it was Fair Search or Search, whatever, something along those lines. And a representative from that group, who happened to be a former attorney general for the state of Rhode Island, was speaking to us all. And he's going on and on about how terrible Google is. And I don't know if any of you remember, but I was in IT. And so he's talking about things that I know about. And I'm doing some research. And I'm like, okay, so your entire budget comes from Microsoft, either directly or indirectly, because it was a lot of Microsoft-owned businesses that were also funding it. I'm like, this isn't right. And he's just flat out lying. And so we get to the question part. And because Vermont was one of the few places that they had been permitted to speak, they, as an organization, invited a whole bunch of media to come, a bunch of newspaper reporters and everything. And I'm listening to this guy just like make stuff up. It's just completely false. And we got to the questions part at the end, and I just stood up and I said, to everyone in the room, I said, I would encourage everyone to do their own research. There are things being said here today that are just not true. And I sat down, and like my heart was in my throat while I did it. And at the end of the meeting, several reporters come over to me, and they were talking to me, and a fun bit that came out of that. My name was published in some articles, and later ended up having lunch with someone who worked at Google. He was an executive vice president at Google in charge of foreign affairs, external affairs, whatever. Matt Dunn, if you're local to Vermont, you know that name. And so I'm having lunch with Matt, and we're chatting, and I said, this is my only real interaction with Google. And he puts his fork down. I was like, wait a second, that was you? I was like, what do you mean? He's like, you were a hero at Google for like 2 weeks. I was a hero at Google for 2 weeks. Didn't get me a job or anything. But what happens when we take the arc of all of these? And I see some of you posting some things, so I'm excited that I get to read them. It would have been easy to let stuff go. I could have left the bank. I could have not said anything. In one case, I did not say something, and I regret it. But in all 3 cases, people were overstepping their bounds. They were violating the social contract. They were lying or being rude in ways that were completely unnecessary and did not further anything. And I'm not okay with that. I kind of wish vigilantism was a real thing sometimes. I watch certain superhero movies, and I'm like, I kind of wish that happened. Because I like when things are done right. I like when things are just. Mark says, our essence as martial artists will be felt by everyone, just as the bullies will be. Yes. Stacy's remembering Alta Vista, the search engine. Yeah. And then he says, I know I've done the same type of thing, waited and watched. I just can't recall specifics. I'm good about waiting to see how an incident plays out, just in case someone needs help, even when I have my kids with me, so they can see that self-defense and defense of others doesn't mean I step in and start throwing punches and kicks. It can also be de-escalation, and it can also be knowing when to call for help. Yes. Frank says, one time at the mall, someone said they were going to kidnap me in the parking lot. I walked away, but when I returned to my car, I had a security guard walk me out to my car. There you go. Mark adds on, just being there helps many times. I think we have an opportunity as martial artists, I know I said this yesterday, I'm going to say it again, to really make the world better, to use our soft skills that come from training, de-escalation, etc., to reduce violence, to make lives better. And the fact that we have that skill means that you could make the argument, I'm not necessarily, that we have a responsibility to do that when the opportunity arises. Regardless, the more we understand and practice stepping in is not easy. Stepping to someone else in public who's being a jerk, it's not easy. But it takes practice, like everything else. It's a skill you develop. And as we do that, we make the world better. And if you look at all of the writings about martial arts from those who started the styles that most of us train in now, that's what it was all about. It was about personal growth. It was about helping others. It wasn't about punching and kicking. So I'm not going to go so far as to say you have a responsibility, but I'd like you to consider the opportunity if it arises. Avel says, a good guy with karate stops a bad guy with karate. Hopefully. Hopefully. Fortunately, there aren't too many bad guys out there with martial arts. It's not as small percentage as it used to be. When I was growing up, you used to be able to assume that if you were in a confrontation, that the person you were working with knew no formal martial arts. Maybe they'd done a little boxing and that was it. But now you've got enough schools that have lost their way in terms of teaching ethics and personal development, that it is a real possibility. So there are your thoughts for the day. If you have stories about this stuff, if you remember some stuff later today, let's, don't be afraid to post it in the chat tomorrow. It is time for me to go. Remember, First Cup is the only martial arts morning show, and you get what I am at that day, right? Sometimes I'm tired, sometimes I'm congested. Most of the time, I'm neither of those things. Live weekday, 6:30 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. And if you want to support us, we've got a Patreon, patreon.com/whistlekick. We've got the code FirstCup15 to save 15% at whistlekick.com. Excuse me, we've also got the family page, whistlekick.com/family. I updated it yesterday. I hope you have a great day. Oh, come on, just close the comments. Let's fix that. Well, thank you, Frank. You know what, Gad? Let's talk about this tomorrow. Here, I'm going to read this, and then I want to talk about this tomorrow. What I feel is that some schools are just not picky enough about who they decide to teach. They let everyone in and usually don't teach the ethics that come with having martial arts skills. How to change this. Let's talk about that tomorrow, because that's a can of worms. Let's do it. Be well, everyone. Have a great day, and I will see you tomorrow.